I'd like to start out introducing everyone here in the room today. We want to thank you for joining us for our NEICE Functionality, ICPC, and ICAMA webinar. I'm Michelle Lytle with the SACWIS team.
Melissa Palmer with the SACWIS team.
Jen Coble, I am the ICAMA Compact Administrator for the state of Ohio.
And Heather Spencer, and I'm the ICPC Deputy Compact Administrator. All right, our agenda for this morning, we're going to start out with ICAMA. You will not believe how simple it will be to establish Ohio Medicaid for these kids going forward. So we're going to go through the new ICAMA screens first. Then we're going to talk about the NEICE interface, which is the National Electronic Interstate Compact Enterprise. And from there, we're going to go through the new ICPC functionality, since we have fully integrated our SACWIS ICPC record with the NEICE interface. And so we're kind of going to toggle back and forth a little bit to go through the workflow for both incoming and outgoing ICPC requests. ICAMA and ICPC will now have separate records featuring streamlined data entry and a few enhancements to help with Medicaid. Additionally, we have this new interface to streamline the process, which is going to save you a lot of time. And finally, we want to touch on some security user group updates. We have some notifications related to ICPC, and also an enhancement so that we can display ICPC placements within the provider records. Okay, ICAMA is entered into SACWIS only upon receipt of an ICAMA referral to establish Ohio Medicaid for a child in receipt of adoption assistance from another state. So ICAMA records should not be created in SACWIS for any Ohio PCSA kids that are being placed for adoption in other states. That process for establishing Medicaid for those kiddos is the same as it is now, which is outside of SACWIS. So we will look at, through this process of updating our ICAMA functionality, kind of gave us an opportunity to look at this thing a little bit, and we may have some opportunities in the future to streamline that process a little bit. But for now, if you need to set up Medicaid for your kid in another state, that's still going to be outside of SACWIS. And the ones that we're going to enter into SACWIS are the ones for referrals that you get for kids that have moved to Ohio. And just a quick reminder that for our presentation this morning, we are in a test environment. And so all of these are made up cases and made up people for the purpose of demonstration. And also to let you know, we are in a test environment. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of going through and testing the new functionality. So it's possible that we may encounter a couple of things that don't seem quite right as we go through this morning. So that's my disclaimer, as it's still a little bit of a work in progress. But if we come into the case, you're going to find that your ICPC records and your ICAMA records are still in the same link. And the process for creating an ICAMA case hasn't changed. So if you receive an ICAMA referral, you're going to go into SACWIS and record a FINS ICAMA intake, listing the children as the participants, and then you link that screened-in intake to create a case. In the case, as I said, the ICPC and ICAMA records are under the same link as before, but as you can see, the lists are separated now instead of having ICPC and ICAMA, which really are two different things, sharing the same pages in SACWIS, which was kind of confusing. We've separated it out. So they're both found in the same place, but as you see, we have an ICPC list at the top and an ICAMA list at the bottom, so the records can be distinguished. You will find that there is no ICAMA list if you are in an adoption case, since ICAMA is not entered into SACWIS for those children, since they're in permanent custody of an Ohio agency. And then each ICAMA record is still going to be child specific. There is a copy feature This icon over here on the right is for copying. If you do need to establish Medicaid for a sibling group, you can copy and some of the details will pull forward. And if you want to add an ICAMA record, all you have to do is select the child from the drop-down, and then you can click the Add button. And it's really pretty simple, and the children who display here are going to be your case members under 22 years of age. So we're going to go into this record that I've set up to show you today. You'll see there's not that much on the page. We broke it down to just the necessities, really. So when you come in, you'll see that the details page has been streamlined, so it's only the information that we need. We start out by just selecting the sending state from a drop-down. The receiving agency is going to default to your agency, so you don't have to pick it. You just have to enter the AA agreement date and the ICAMA 700 form date. That'll be in the referral documentation. And then what we've added, in order for Medicaid to have the address and contact information of the adoptive parents, we will complete a person search so we can link one or both parents as applicable. So we have in here a search person button, and you'll just go out and do a person search. If the person doesn't exist in SACWIS already, you'll create a person. And that way you make sure that their address is current and that they have a primary contact information that's current. And this information will get passed along through our interface with Medicaid system so that they'll be able to send information straight to the adoptive parents. So we have information on the screen just to let you know that for the adoptive parent or guardian, Medicaid information will be sent to this address. If you pull someone in and the address is not current for them, this person's name is a hyperlink, so you can just click it to go out to their person record, make the updates, and then when you save, you'll come back to this page. It's really simple. And then at the bottom, it is going to display the child's address. And again, this is where their Medicaid card will be sent. So just in case the child is located somewhere else, not with the parents, we want to make sure that the card is going where the child is. So the primary address on the child's person record is going to display here, and that's where the Medicaid card will go. So again, if that information is not current, you'll see the child's name is at the top of the page, and it's a hyperlink. So if you click it, it will take you right to the person record, so you can make any changes you need to on the address. And then finally, we'll just record the Ohio Medicaid effective date, which should be on the referral documentation that you receive, and save the record. And it will automatically make the status of the record active, which will show down here in the bottom, and a Medicaid span will get created. So when the child is no longer eligible for Medicaid through ICAMA, you're just going to come back in and record the Ohio Medicaid termination date here and save the record. And this will update the status to close, and it'll end the Medicaid span. I did include in the handouts screenshots of some of these pages, so you'll have them to refer to later or to share with others at your agency. Someone wanted to know how to terminate the Medicaid, and there is a termination date field here at the bottom right hand on the screen. So you'll just enter the date, and when you save the record, and we'll go back out to the list page, you'll see that the status is now showing as closed. And it's that simple. SACWIS has a batch process that talks to Medicaid system, so once you've entered a termination date, it will end their Medicaid span. So once you actually have that date entered, it will terminate. There's a question about how it will go from ICAMA to regular Medicaid after. And actually for these children, these are children who get Medicaid based on being in receipt of adoption assistance from another state. So they might have been adopted by an Ohio family, and the child is from another state that is, providing adoption subsidy and the child is eligible for Medicaid. Or it could be a family that adopted their child years ago and they have relocated to Ohio. So you're going to leave your ICAMA case open for as long as that child is eligible for ICAMA Medicaid, which in most cases is going to be until they turn 18 and sometimes 21. So in most cases, you're just going to leave this record open, and you should be receiving information if their Medicaid ends from any other, like if their eligibility is ending from another state.
Sorry, this is Jen. If for some reason the other state has extended their adoption assistance beyond age 18, we're supposed to receive a notification letting us know how long it's been extended, whether it's until they finish high school or until they're 21. So you should be notified by the other state through me if the adoption assistance is ended, and then we can terminate Medicaid. Beyond 21, they would not qualify for any type of ICAMA Medicaid. So if they're looking for medical assistance beyond age 21, I think at that point they just have to apply like anybody else would apply for a Medicaid.
We also had a question about the managed care information, and yes, it's my understanding that now that we are able to supply Medicaid with the adoptive parent's address and contact info, that Medicaid will be able to send managed care information, and the adoptive family will be able to select their own plan. For ICAMA, any worker with access to the case can view an ICAMA record, and anyone who's assigned to the case, including anyone that supervises that person, can edit records for their own agency. We do have a security role, user group that is called ICPC and ICAMA ADCA Administrator. So if you do have a person at your agency that manages these cases for the whole agency, you can give them that security and they'll be able to edit any records for your agency, even if they're not specifically assigned to the case. So we're going to turn our attention to ICPC now. So the ICPC record has been redesigned to streamline the data entry process. Records are specific to the type of request, whether it's incoming placement to Ohio or outgoing from Ohio to another state. And fields are going to display as needed depending on the type of placement requested. Again, we tried to minimize the data entry to just those things that you need. Multiple children, so if you have a sibling group, can now share a single ICPC record in SACWIS as long as the request is to place them all with the same placement resource. So if you would like to, for example, ask the state of Florida to do a home study with grandma and you want to send 3 children, you're able to do one ICPC record in SACWIS. You would still generate 3 separate 100A forms since each child is required to have one, but you can put all 3 children on one ICPC record because your goal is to place them all into grandma's home. And then if you wanted to also make a request for another relative in another state, what have you, as long as all the children on the record are to be placed with that same resource, you can put them together on one ICPC. Improvements have also been made to provide for establishing Ohio Medicaid for children being placed into Ohio, whether they're 4E eligible or not. And this would be, in particular, children who are in the custody of another state agency. And we'll go into that a little bit more later. Additionally, for ICPC cases that are managed at the state level versus the county, the state office will be able to select the county from a drop-down, which will enable you at the county to go into SACWIS and select a managed care plan for that child without having to do any dual data entry as you have in the past. So in those instances, Heather Spencer would reach out to you and ask for your assistance and you'll have access to go in and select the managed care plan for those children, and those children placed into your county will also display on your managed care, your Medicaid eligibility roster report, so that you'll know that they're kind of on your list as far as kids who you can select managed care plans for. Another enhancement is that the placement resource will now be linked to the ICPC record as either a person or provider. So when a child is placed in the home of an Ohio provider or in a residential setting, the ICPC placements can be displayed in the provider record, which we'll also show you later. The best thing is we now have an interface between SACWIS and the NEICE system. So I'm going to turn it over to Heather to share some background information about NEICE.
So the NEICE is, as it says on the screen, a web-based system where we're able to, in real time, send documents back and forth between any states that are on the NEICE system. The NEICE pilot for the NEICE was launched in 2013 with 6 states, and then there was a federal government grant for the rollout of the NEICE to all the states in 2015, which is why a lot of states started getting on. But from the pilot, they found that the benefits to the NEICE system are that it's more secure than email. There will be faster communication between states, no lost paperwork, there's faster placement of children, and they save money in postage and paper. So there were a lot of benefits to the NEICE system. And that really is the goal of the NEICE system and why the federal government has been encouraging all states to get on. And there was actually a federal law passed that all states have to be on the NEICE by 2027. As of right now, 19 states are actively using the NEICE system. 38 have signed MOUs, which basically means they've signed a contract to get onto the NEICE. So they've started paying NEICE fees, and those rest of those 38 should be on the system by the end of the year. At least that's the plan. So over half of the states that you deal with will be on the NEICE system by the end of this year.
And just to let you know, even though there are 19 states currently using NEICE, Ohio is the trailblazer for having a full interface. The early states actually are logging into a separate system and recording the information that you would normally get on your 100A, and then being able to send that electronically. So Ohio has actually integrated NEICE into our SACWIS system so that you only have to enter your data one time, and because we definitely don't want to have anybody having to re-enter things. So, excuse me. So we're the first, but there are some other states following suit that are in various stages of getting that implementation. Okay, so when we're in NEICE and we're talking about how the NEICE records go, there's some terminology that is used. Basically, each ICPC placement request, it doesn't matter how many children, but a group of children with the same placement provider is considered one placement request in NEICE. And then within each request, you can have multiple communications back and forth. So for example, your initial request will be your first communication, and then so you'll send your initial placement request with your 100A and all the information, and then when that other state goes out and completes the home study and they sign off on your 100A saying, yes, that placement's approved, they will send that communication back to you as the response to your placement request. And so it's basically just going back and forth, doing what you already do now as far as your communications back and forth with another state, whether it's an incoming or an outgoing request, and just being able to do all of that communication electronically. And then in this, when we get into the screens, you'll see that there's also a tab for attachments. So if you're looking at the requests on the NEICE side, you'll be able to see all the documents that have come in or gone out through NEICE. So anything that's been sent to you for this request, as well as anything you have sent out, will be all listed on one page for you to see. Okay, so if I'm logged into SACWIS and I go to my utilities, there's a link here in the menu at the bottom for NEICE requests. So we're going to look at the functionality starting with just the basic NEICE screens. The only users who will have access to the NEICE requests from this menu are those who have been designated as Assistant Deputy Compact Administrators for your agency. And we'll talk again later about the specific security user groups that you want to make sure the right folks have. So basically, your ADCA for your agency is the point person, your ICPC coordinator, if you will, who's responsible for signing off on those 100 A's, who's responsible for sending the request through NEICE. And they're also going to be the person who will be notified when something comes in through NEICE, and then be able to go in and retrieve that communication or that placement request. Workers from their case will be able to create communications. They'll be able to create a NEICE request if you want to send children to another state for placement. You'll be able to do that and come into the NEICE request from your ICPC record. But the only people who will have access from the admin utilities NEICE request link will be those ADCA people who are kind of overseeing for all of the cases at your agency. So the list page is divided by tabs into incoming requests and outgoing requests. You have some filters available on the page, including the ability to search by the child's name. And you also, the default sort is by the latest communication date. So whatever has most recently come in or gone out will be at the top, but you also have some other options available. So if you know you're looking for something from Florida, let's say, you can sort it by state or by date received, et cetera. Here in the grid, you're going to see all of your NEICE requests. Again, we're on the incoming tab, so these will be all the things that have come into Ohio. You have here a little drawer for most recent activity, and if you click on that, it will show you that the most recent thing for this particular NEICE request is the placement request that was received on May 22nd. If you had sent a new communication back or a response, say yesterday, then that would display here with yesterday's date. So it just kind of shows you what's the most recent thing that's happened or been done through NEICE for this specific request. Now, the NEICE system gives each case an ID once it has been sent through NEICE. So you'll see that NEICE ID in the first column here. The children's names should be displaying, but they're not, per my earlier disclaimer, but we will get that worked out before it goes into production. You can see the sending state, the date received, the status as well. And again, right now, this is just in that we got a request phase. And the placement resources name will display as well. We have an actions menu all the way on the right. And the actions menu is dynamic based on the status of the request. So this is an example of an initial request. And so when this comes in, we would be able to look at the request, would be the first thing that we'd want to do. Once we've taken a look at it and we make sure that everything is as it should be and it really should have been sent to me, then I can create an intake from here. Or if it shouldn't have been sent to me, I can actually reject the request from here. So we'll go ahead and view the request. And when you first come in, you'll notice up top, there's information about just basics about the request. So we'll see the children's names, the placement resources names, the placement type, and the sending state. There's also a little expandable here if you click on this arrow that has a little bit more information in the header. So we'll see that the initial request was for a home study. We have an address here, responsible agency in Ohio that came over. You'll notice the page has two tabs. First, we have communications, and as I said earlier, this is going to be a list of each transmittal that has gone back and forth through the NEICE system. So far we just have one. We've received the placement request. All the attachments are on the next tab. So if you look over here, you'll see that we got some documents that were sent to us, 100A, a social history, and that's, we can view the documents here, or we can actually click to go to the file. But it's just a list, and the documents are also going to be accessible to the caseworker from the ICPC side, and we'll get there soon. Okay. If we view the request, we'll see basic information about the request in the header, again, with the same expandable drawer. And this is basically your information that you would normally see for on your 100A. That's the main information that's here. And we're going to come back to this page shortly to kind of show you how we would actually take action on this. But to better understand what happens when we send and receive requests from NEICE, let's take a look at the updates to the ICPC record. So if I come into my case and go to my ICPC ICAMA link, you'll see that you have your ICPC list here at the top, and again, ICAMA's down below. The ICPC list will now show both the ICPC record ID and the NEICE ID if there is one. So if the request was sent or received through NEICE, that NEICE ID that the other system assigns to the case will display here. And again, as Heather mentioned, not all states are on NEICE right now. So you will still have the manual process for sending information when it's not a NEICE participating state. Additionally, any cases that you already have in progress that came to you through the mail or however, you know, the old way, are not going to be in NEICE now. So you're going to finish those cases out the way that you have. So anything that going forward starts out being processed through NEICE, you'll be able to send and receive all your communications through to the end through the NEICE system. But you won't have to go back and, you know, upload all your old documents and things like that for the cases that are already in progress. For an outgoing request that's been made active in this same column where it's the ICPC or the NEICE ID, if I have a request that's active, like this one on the second row here, and I haven't done anything more with it yet, then I'll have here, instead of a NEICE ID, I'll see create request. So for this example, I already created a request in NEICE, so now it's telling me that that request is pending. So this being a test environment, I haven't actually sent it through NEICE yet. The system hasn't done that. It will do the sending and receiving in a batch process that's going to run every hour during the workday. So when you set something up and you set it to send, it'll take a little while, but then it will go. And when NEICE gets it, NEICE will assign it an ID and send that information back to SACWIS, and you'll see that ID here. And we're going to show you that process of creating a request. The list also is going to display the names of all the children who are linked to the ICPC record. You're going to see the sending and receiving states, the Ohio agency that created the record. You're going to see whether it's incoming or outgoing, and also the name of the placement resource, as long as it's been recorded in the record so far. In the last column, you have a reports icon. You also have a delete if the record is still pending. Once the record has been made active, you can't delete it. So to demonstrate the functionality, we're going to first walk through an outgoing request. So we're going to go into this pending outgoing request. When you come in and you select the receiving state, if that state participates in NEICE, you'll see a message on the screen that tells you that the NEICE program is available. If it's not a NEICE state, you will not see that message. So that's how you'll know as soon as you come in to start setting up your ICPC record, you'll know whether or not this is going to be processed through NEICE. And this information is in real time because the system is going out and getting the information from NEICE. So if a new state joins in a couple of weeks, let's say, the system should have that information and we'll know that that state is now participating in NEICE. And again, if NEICE is not available, you're still going to complete your outgoing ICPC record for your kids the same way. The only difference is you'll be mailing the information to the other state just as you always have. So when you select a state, you'll also, if it's a NEICE state, you'll see an option to select the ICPC coordinator's office. So for some states, that's one office all the time. The other couple of decentralized states like Ohio, which is California and Colorado, they'll have some options there. And then if you select the office from the drop-down, the address is going to automatically pull in because we have that information from NEICE as well. There's a box for any comments that you want to add. That's optional. And then we move down to the next section, which is the identifying information. And here we would just come in and we would click to add children. We're able to select any of the kids from our case members under 21. And then you would save to add those kids to the record. We're going to stick with this one guy. Once I select a child, all of his information, current information that we have for this person from SACWIS is going to display here. So you'll have date of birth, age, race and ethnicity information, ICWA eligibility, 4E eligibility, and this is going out and looking at the records that we have current as of today for that child's status as far as 4E and for ICWA. If the information is not recorded on the person record, the system is going to just say that it's not recorded, and you could go click on the hyperlink to go to the person record and add that information if anything is missing. Now, the next field is the child's legal status. And again, all of this is just information that you would normally put on your 100A. So the legal status, if the legal status has been recorded in SACWIS for this child that's in your custody, the system will calculate the legal status based on whatever the current information is. If for some reason the information in SACWIS is not available, or if there is no legal status in SACWIS, or if the information is incorrect, you're able to select. And it's taking the legal status that you enter in the court area of SACWIS with your legal actions and rulings, and it's actually taking that legal custody status and translating it into the language used for the 100A, for the ICPC. So these won't exactly match up to what you see when you have temporary custody, let's say. It's going to show sending agency custody / guardianship, because that's the language that's used in the compact and what we're going to see on the 100A. We'll move down the page, and after we've added our children, then we have questions about the agency or person responsible for planning. You're going to go ahead and fill in anything that's missing, you know, who's the contact person at your agency, the address, the phone number, etc. If the agency or person financially responsible is the same, you are done there. If it's different, you'll see you get another set of boxes to fill in the information. And then finally on this tab, we have the placement information. We're going to select the type of care requested, and based on that, the rest of the fields are dynamic. So if I've selected a relative, then I'm going to be asked what's the relationship of that relative to the child. And then I'm going to be asked, well, who is the person that the child is to be placed with? And I can search person, which is what I've done here. I can optionally add a second person. If there's also a Grandpa Smith, I could go ahead and search and or create a person and link him in here as well. That's optional to add a second person. And then if, let's say, Granny Smith already has a provider record in SACWIS, I could also search for that provider. So if Granny Smith has been a kinship placement in the past, I can go out and find that provider record and link it directly to my ICPC as well. If you select a person and they do have provider records, there will be a message that displays to let you know that Granny Smith is found in 2 provider records, so that you kind of have a hint that you could go look for that.
I'd just like to insert here that the type of care requested, even if it's a relative, but you want a foster home study on the relative, then the type of care requested is foster care, even though it is a relative. So don't select relative unless you want a relative home study completed, because that's the information that the other state will see in NEICE.
Thanks, Heather. I just want to show you, if we say instead that we are requesting for adoption, then you're going to be asked additional questions, like to specify the type of adoption, whether there's 40 or non-40 subsidy, and whether the adoption should be finalized in the sending state or receiving state, like what is the plan there. So the same things that you're used to checking boxes on the 100A, and that's really what all this information is for. It's going to send this data electronically to the NEICE system, as well as populate the fields on the 100A, the actual document. Next, we're going to go to the Services and Documents tab. Note that when I move tabs, SACWIS is telling me that my data has been saved. We do automatically save when you move to the next tab. And then we're just going to answer more questions that will be used to populate the 100A. So this is going to ask about the supervising agency in the receiving state and their address, the initial report type, and again, we said we were asking for a relative home study, how the supervision should be arranged, the frequency of the supervisory reports, and then these last 2 fields are actually to be entered after you generate your 100A and have the appropriate people at your agency sign off on it. So the information that NEICE wants from us here is actually the name of the people who signed the 100A and the date that they signed it. So you can actually save your record, generate your 100A, get it signed off, and then you're going to come in and document those signatures. In particular, the sending state ICPC admin, deputy, or alternate, that is your ADCA person that needs to sign the 100A. So that's who we want to see here. Now, also on this tab is where we will attach any documents. All documents that you create or that you have as part of your record that you will want to send to the other state, you will upload here in your ICPC record. Anything that you receive through NEICE, you will also find here. Once it comes in, it will be in this list of documentation/attachments. So you're going to do all your uploading here, and then when you actually are trying to set up your NEICE communication, you can then select from the documents that are uploaded which ones you want to attach to that communication to send at that time. But here's where all the uploading magic happens. All you're gonna do is click Upload Document, and you're gonna get the document information screen. The category is already set to ICPC. We already know that these are related to this ICPC record. You will be asked to select a document type. And for your initial request, NEICE is going to require that you have a 100-day document for each child that is connected to this ICPC record. So we can say that this is our signed 100-day document. We can call it whatever we want. We give it a name so that we can identify it, the date that's on the document, and then we have to select a reference person. That is for NEICE, but it's also checks and balances to make sure that if you do have 3 kids on the ICPC record and you're trying to send that request through NEICE, the system is going to look for a 100A for each child to make sure that you've got everything you need to send an initial request. You can add any comments here if you want to, make a note about the document, whatever it may be. And again, there's several types. It can just be, you know, additional information, miscellaneous if you have something that doesn't fit. But a lot of it is things that you're familiar with that you would be sending anyway, like court orders or documents. As I said, you have to have something labeled as 100A for each child on your initial request, but the rest of the required documents you can send as a combined home study request packet, excluding 100A. So it's kind of how you normally, you know, have a collection of documents that you send as part of your request. You can put that packet all together if you want to and under one name. If the document that you're uploading does pertain to all of the children, you can pick any one in that instance, but I would suggest that you use the case reference person just to keep it consistent. But basically, all you would do next is click the Browse button, and it's really just the same as like putting an attachment on an email. You hit Browse, it's going to pull up your files, and you'd be able to select your file that you want to attach here. And then you'll just save it, and you're done. And again, any documents that are uploaded to the ICPC record in the case will be available to attach to the communications you then send through NEICE. Likewise, the documents that come in are going to be accessible from the NEICE side or from the case side. There's a couple of questions I'll just take right now before we move on. We had a question about incoming versus outgoing, and we actually have, the records are very similar, but the wording is changed and some of the fields are only applicable one way. When we're talking about an outgoing request, this is going to be kids that you have in your custody, or that, you know, for the cases that Heather handles, even like a parent in Ohio that wants to place their child in a residential in another state, or a private agency that's arranging an adoption in another state. So these are Ohio kids that we want to place out of Ohio. So these are the outgoing ones. The incoming ones are going to be those kids coming to Ohio from any other state. So those are going to be those requests that you get a lot of times to go out and do a home study, or, you know, if it's a home that you have, an adoptive home, that you're getting a request because they want to place in your home. So those are going to be your incoming records. And we did that so that we can, first of all, have a little bit easier time knowing what it is that we're looking at, and better data for tracking just how many records are coming in and going out. Whereas with the old ICPC record, it was kind of trying to be all things. So you had like, enter the sending or the, sending or receiving state. It was a little confusing to me anyway. So we're hoping that this will make it a little more clear. There's a question about, can we determine which attachments are affiliated with which communication for any request? I believe when we're looking at it in this record, we're not going to be able to see specifically which ones were sent with which communication or which ones came from a certain communication without actually going to NEICE. Instead, this is going to be a collection of all the documents for this record as part of your case record. So I think of it as these are all the documents I have in the file for my ICPC. I'm just going to save this quickly to go and show you something on the outside, though. Once I go ahead and send my request and I get a NEICE ID, I'm able to, or even in this case where I've created a pending request, I can click this hyperlink and it will take me to the NEICE request details. And there I can look at the specific communications. So for example, this one, I can look at it and I can see it's the same information. It looks a lot like what we just saw as far as the 100A, and I can see which documents are linked to this. I can link attachments from here, and if there are any more documents, I could pick them. I already did it all. So you're able to go, again, straight from your ICPC record. If you're the caseworker and you don't have access to that admin menu, you're able to link to the NEICE record if you want to look at specific communications that have been sent or received. We also have a question about whether an agency can have more than one ADCA so that there's coverage when the ADCA is out. And yes, you can have and should have a backup person and make sure that both of them have security so that they're able to access the records and that they'll both get the notifications, which I'm going to show you a little later as well. We also have a question about there are some states that do require relatives to become licensed foster homes prior to placement. We don't at this time have information available in NEICE to know what the requirements of each state are to become licensed prior to placing the child. Some of that information may be available on the NEICE-ICPC website. I know there are state pages, and we can send out that link as an enhancement that we thought of kind of late. I thought it might be nice to add that link into the ICPC record so that you have a quick access to it if you need information about the state you're sending to. So that's something that we can try to do in the future. So again, as far as the documents, you're going to follow whatever your agency's procedure is. I go back to the services page. As far as how you scan and where you store your documents at your agency. And then when you're coming in here, you're just retrieving those documents and uploading them into SACWIS. Anything that's uploaded to your ICPC record is then available for you to connect to a communication as an attachment. Again, it's kind of like an email attachment, only it's more secure. So you're just attaching those documents to go with your placement request, or you're attaching that home study for your placement decision.
And to be clear, you can attach documents even if it's not going to be going through NEICE. So for any new case, even for existing cases for that matter, if you want to have all your documents stored in SACWIS, so you have easy availability for all your documents, that would be great. And once we go live with this, we really would encourage you to link all your documents, all your ICPC documents to the ICPC records, even if they're not going through NEICE, because again, SACWIS is really your record for the case. So that will just keep everything in one place.
We also have a little helper at the bottom of the page. It says, if you're not sure you have all the information you need for the placement, you can click here and it will take you to a handy checklist that Heather Spencer has created that's actually been posted to the SACWIS knowledge base, and it will take you directly there, which has a list of the items needed for sending various types of requests through ICPC. So once we've entered the information on the first two tabs, we really have all we need to generate our 100A and send our request through NEICE. So once you have all of that, we can go ahead and mark this record active. And I forgot something. Sent date. Well, you'll at least see that we gave you a handy helper to tell you which tab the missing information is on. I forgot to put a sent date. And whether or not this was a Reg 7 or a Reg 1, which is an intact relocation. So you have a family that the child's already placed with and they're all moving together to the other state. We're going to say none of the above. Now we can make it active. Okay, so once the record is active, we're not able to change our receiving state anymore because we've already made our decisions with all of this information for our 100A. If let's see, I'm going to show you the last tab, which is results and decisions. So once you have an active record, then when you're getting communications back from that other state, so they do the home study, they send back the signed 100A, and they tell you, yes, you can make the placement. If it comes through NEICE, some of this information is going to get populated for you. But remember, there will be those cases that you're finishing out, that you've already started, or the states that haven't gotten on NEICE yet, as we're in this transitional phase. So you may be coming in to manually enter this information if they sent you that home study and the signed 100A in the mail. So if you say placement has been approved, placement can be made, then we need to put in the signature date. That's the date the other state signed off on that 100A and the date that you got it back. We also have a field to track when you received your home study narrative, since we know, especially with a Reg 7, there are shorter timelines for getting that information to you. So you can document when you actually received the home study narrative if it came ahead of the rest of the information.
That's for those situations in compliance with the federal law to have the narrative back within 60 days. Then if they've just sent the home study narrative, but they haven't sent the signed 100A yet, then that's the date you can use for that. We've just received the home study narrative. We have not received everything yet. We haven't received the background checks or the training, or something is not fully there for them to approve or deny yet.
Thank you. When you do receive your 100B that says that they're placing the child, you can also document the date the child was placed and the date that is on the 100B. A word about this field down here, similar to we talked about earlier where NEICE wants to know who signed the 100A. This signature is asking, this field is asking for the name of the person in the other state who signed off on the approval or denial of your placement request. So when they're sending that back to you, whoever has signed on the bottom of it is who is going to go in here. And if it comes from NEICE, that should be populated with the information that NEICE, that other state has put in that they're sending to you. But just to let you know, that's the name that we're looking for here, is who was that other state's ABCA. Okay, and then again, once you're ready to terminate the ICPC record, if you put a termination date in, then we're going to ask what was the date that you sent that 100B to the other state to let them know, and what's the termination reason. And that's just the same thing you would be used to as to why you'd be terminating the ICPC for this child. Now, the child information on the ICPC details page is per child, as well as on the results and decisions page. So if I have multiple children, each one is going to have his or her own section on this tab. And that's because we know that you might have a sibling group and maybe placement is approved for some but not all of the children. So the answer to placement may be made could be different for each child depending on what information you got back. the other thing is you may choose to use the placement for one of the children and not for the other one. So there's a variety of outcomes, and it may not be the same, or it may not all happen on the same day for different kids. So you are able to come in and answer the questions on this tab specifically for the outcomes for each individual child, and you can terminate each individual child's ICPC at different times. So perhaps one child's adoption has finalized, but another child's is still pending. You will keep the ICPC record open until everybody is done, but you could terminate the child that is finalized. So before we move on to demonstrate the process for an incoming ICPC request that comes to you from NEICE, are there any questions about how to create outgoing records? Okay, there's a policy question asking if there is a rule that says the supervisor of ICPC can't be the compact administrator to manage all this.
I'm not sure. I'm thinking you're asking about the regulation for the compact that says that the person signing off on the 100A cannot be a person basically who did the home study or who's signing off on the home study itself. That's in the ICPC regulations. So those have to be two separate people.
We have a question just for clarification. So any cases that you are currently working that are not part of NEICE, haven't gone through NEICE to date, you are going to continue to work those outside the system and correspond with the other states the way that you always have. So we're kind of, we're supporting a dual process as we're in a transitional phase here, and you've got those old cases that are already in progress. You're going to finish them out as is. And then also for those states, you know, that are in the process of getting on NEICE, in the meantime, we do still have to support the manual process, since not all states are going to be able to send you their requests through the system or receive requests this way. So in the meantime, those ones are all going to be done outside of SACWIS, just the way they always have been, but you're able now to, you know, upload your documents. As Heather mentioned, it's good to have the records all in one place. It helps, you know, for people to be able to have access to the information and so on. So, but you're correct, it's going to be still outside. There's a question about, can you see a 100A on the attachments tab in the NEICE? And we're going to go there, so I think I can show you that. The SACWIS report for the 100A is still undergoing some updates related to this work, so I'm not going to generate the report from in here. However, I will show you, now that we made our record for this child active, I do have that create request link now, so I can go ahead and create my request. It takes me into the NEICE communication. All of my information that I'm going to send to Florida is spelled out here. And again, it kind of mirrors what we saw in the ICPC record. It's the same basic information, you know, that would go on my 100A. So they're actually not just getting the documents that I send them, but they're also getting the data, which is going to be really amazing in a few minutes when I show you what happens on the receiving side. So all that data has pulled forward for my outgoing request to Florida. I can click the link attachments button, and here's my 100A document that I want to attach, which I think is just a sample blank 100A that I put. But if you wanted to look at the attachment, you can just click here and it will actually just open that document for you so you can see it. So I link my document. It's now showing there. I have my 100A. I can go ahead and mark my communication completed and save that. If I am a person who has the ADCA security and I can send and receive requests, you see I now have a send button. So that person's going to have this request that's pending. They can review, everything's good, you have all your information attached. I will go ahead and send it. So, and then this is going to be a little slow here in the test environment, but you can get the idea. I'll go ahead and send the record, and it'll be a pending request for this record. I don't want to be, but all right. And there it is. It says I have sent my communication, and it was my placement request. If I close, I can come back here, and now we have a NEICE ID that is displaying here. So again, if I'm the caseworker and I come in next week, I can click here and I can go look at that NEICE communication. The two are linked. Okay. We do have a question about, again, is there a list of states that will have access to NEICE? And the place that we have that is when you go inside to create your record and you select your state. If it's a state that participates in NEICE, then the system's going to tell you that right away. We have another question about the required case manager statement. We do have an enhancement logged to create a new report that you would be able to generate from here to meet that requirement for the case manager statement, but meanwhile, you will have to create that the way you have now. It is something that we are working on. Okay, we have another policy-related question. Regarding not being able to sign 100As if you sign off on home studies, does that mean the person for NEICE entering meeting the security can't be the same person signing off on the home studies? So basically, can the supervisor still enter all of this outgoing packet info and have access to send and receive requests?
Anybody that you feel needs this should be the one to compile the packet, to upload things into SACWIS, to enter the fields, really can do that. But the person signing the 100A cannot be the person. So when you put, the signature name on it for the ADCA signature, when, on the actual 100A document itself, whoever signs that 100A has to be somebody different from somebody who did the home study. So say you've got two people who you've designated as your ADCA, your ICPC coordinator for your county. One of them could be somebody, maybe one of those did supervise the home study process for this one case, and they're signing off on the home study, but the other ADCA can sign the 100A. But the one who signed off the home study, they can certainly assist with compiling everything, getting everything into SACWIS. It's just that the other person who did not sign off on the home study has to be the one to actually sign the 100A document. And they really should be reviewing everything themselves, because when they're signing, they're saying, we saw this and we think this is good, and my name is on this, approving this. But the important thing is who's signing the 100A for that situation.
We have a question about the 100A. So just to clarify, even though you are entering all of the information in your ICPC record to populate the 100A, you do have to generate the actual report, print it out, have that person sign it, who's designated for your agency, and then you're going to need to scan and upload the signed version back into SACWIS, because that's the one you need to send. It is a little bit of a process, but that is how it works. Now, you do have the ability in your reports link to generate your 100A, and it's not hooked up right now to work with the new functionality in our test environment, but all of the information that you enter in your ICPC record will be used to populate that 100A form. So all you're really gonna have to do is just generate it, print it out, and then have that person at your agency sign off on it. Then you do need to scan it and put it with your documents for sending, because that's the version that you want to send, is the one that has the signature. We have some good suggestions for adding some info icons throughout here, and so we will take that back, because I agree there are some things that it would be nice to provide that information for you on the screen, and we can do that. We do have one other question. It says, as a supervisor that oversees the home study process, I also play a dual role in that I supervise all ICPC incoming and outgoing requests. So would I not be able to sign off on the home study along with my assessor and the 100A?
That is correct. If you are signing the home study, you cannot sign the 100A. It will have to be somebody else who is designated as an ICPC coordinator / ADCA for your county. Because if they're not on that list as a designated person, the other state may not accept it.
And again, it's good to have a backup for your agency, because you never know if that ADCA may be out, and we always need to have a backup person. So it could be that you sign off on the home study and that backup person can sign off on the 100A. Okay, so for incoming requests from NEICE, we have additional time-saving features available. So the ADCA is going to receive a notification when there is a new request that comes in from another state. So after going into NEICE and reviewing that request to, again, make sure it was sent to the correct county and that the required information is there, an intake can be created directly from the NEICE request. If there's missing information, you can send a communication back saying, hey, you're missing stuff, I can't process this until you send me these other things. Or if it went to county A and it should have gone to county B, you can also reject the request with a note to that other state saying, hey, this was sent in error, you need to send it to this other county. So if everything looks good and you're accepting this request, you will actually create your intake with the click of a button right from inside that NEICE request. The intake itself has been streamlined to get rid of fields you don't need for ICPC, as well as ICAMA intakes. So for those ones that you are setting up manually, if they come to you in the mail still from a non-NEICE state and you have to go in and record an intake, at least there will be fewer questions to answer. Now with that, and we'll see in a minute, there is still, there is the new substance abuse question that is still showing up in the intake. So we're always going to say not applicable until a not too distant future build, when we can remove that question as well, because it really doesn't apply for what your purpose is in setting up these ICPC or ICAMA intakes just to open a case. So anyway, you're going to automatically create a streamlined, simple intake, and then we'll be able to go in, finish up a few things within the intake, and then link that intake to the case and automatically create the ICPC record. So we are going to go back to the NEICE screen and we're going to walk through this process. Back inside our NEICE screen, we have an incoming NEICE request from Florida. Again, we can go in, we can take a look at the communication, review all the information that's here. If it doesn't belong to me, I can reject request, an explanation as to why, and save. And that will send that communication back to that other state saying, no, sorry, this isn't for us. If, however, everything looks good and I have all of this stuff, I am going to say create an intake. Please note, there is no turning back once you create an intake without contacting the help desk. So if you create an intake in error and you didn't mean to do that for this ICPC request, you meant to reject it, you will have to get a hold of the help desk to help take care of clearing that intake out for you. We're also not going to allow these intakes that come from NEICE to be screened out, because then that request is just kind of stuck, and we need to resolve the request. So you'll also find that if you try to screen out a NEICE-created ICPC intake, the system's going to give you a message to please call the help desk if you did this by mistake. So they can help you. This is taking a minute, but it's because we're in a test environment and because SACWIS is doing the work for me to set up this intake. So here I am in my intake. We're going to clean this up a little bit here, but basically it's already got some narrative there saying this is a request from Florida for foster placement of this kid with this adult. It's already selected FIN's ICPC. Like I said, this question we plan to get rid of, but in the meantime, I can say that the substance use concerns is not applicable. I say none of above. And then the only other thing I need to do, actually, I'll show you, the reporter tab is even filled out. It's not supposed to say test, but it is supposed to say ICPC. But your reporter tab is filled out. Most of your basic tab is filled out. I have to be patient. And on the participants tab, the system has already set up a temporary participant in your intake, just like you can do manually with the information that was provided by NEICE. All you have to do is search SACWIS to either find the person record that exists or create a new person. So I'm going to come in here, and this is just like you always do in an intake. I'm going to search for my person. He's not in here. I'm going to create him and save. If you have multiple children, they will all be here. You just have to do this process for each child. And then we're basically done with the intake. So we are saving time because the worker in Florida entered all of this information for us into NEICE, so we don't have to type all of this stuff over again. All right. So now you see I have a Luke with a person ID. He already has his role. If there's more than one child, you will record the relationships between those children. But otherwise, we're done with this. So we can mark our intake complete. If I have the security to do screening decision, I will also do that. If not, then this will be on the workload for the decision maker to do the next step. I can go ahead and screen this in because we want to create our case. It's just the same process that we always do for our intakes. Here's my intake. I'm ready to link it to a case. I don't have a case already for this kid, so I'm going to create one. Make him the case reference person. Same process that we're used to. And now, when I go into the case and I look in the ICPC link, I already have an ICPC record with the NEICE ID attached to it. It's all there. It's very exciting for us. So you can come in and look at it and you'll see that it's got the information. And again, this is an incoming record, so it's kind of the mirror of what we saw when we were creating an outgoing record. We are, in this case, you know, Florida is the sending state. These are the details of what we received. So the language is applicable to the circumstance. So you don't have to guess what kind of records you're looking at anymore. This is an incoming record and it's telling me that. You also see the NEICE ID up here should you need to reference it. If there's any issue with NEICE, or if you're having communication with the other state, you need to reference the NEICE ID that they're familiar with. That's there at the top now too. So basically, all of the information is here about the kids, planning, placement information. What you're going to do though is, again, you have here in the placement information, you'll see that this is just text. When we set it up and we did search provider or person, then it's a hyperlink to that record. This is just what the person in Florida typed in that they wanted to place with this person. So SACWIS has put the information here as a placeholder, but you'll want to go ahead and search for that person in SACWIS and actually create a person record for them if they don't already exist to link into the record. If it is a foster home that you manage that's being used, this is a foster care request and they already have a provider record, you can go ahead and link that provider record to it. What that does is it's going to let the provider worker know about it, and it's also going to, again, we're going to show you towards the end, but it's going to make the placement visible in the provider record, which will help the provider worker when they're updating their home study. So the information is all populated, but again, you can make updates as needed. It comes over as a pending record. So I did not mean to close it. Let me go back out. If you accidentally close it, don't save. All right, so once you have everything looks good, you can go ahead and make that record active. Now, again, on the services and documents page, it's the same mirror image. It's who's the supervising agency that's been asked to do this. Here's my documents that were sent to me. We're being asked if all information was received. We already have that question in the old records. And if you're not sure, again, we have a link so you can go look at the checklist to make sure, did they send me everything they were supposed to for this request? If you didn't get everything, you can say what's missing. You can do an additional information communication to that state to say, hey, I'm missing the court document or what have you, and ask them to send it. But you can go ahead and proceed with the case while they're getting those things together. As long as you have all the main information, you can get started. And then finally, when you get to that results and decisions page, this is where you're going to be documenting your decision about this placement and then sending this information back to the other state. So let's say you got this request, the home is approved, you say yes, the placement can be made. What date did you now sign, or your ABCA person, sign off on that 100A that you're sending back to the other state? What date are you sending it? Did you send your home study narrative? All of these things. When the child actually is placed in the home, you can document that as well, and you'll see that if and when the child actually is placed, I have additional fields available so I can establish Ohio Medicaid for that child. We can start Ohio Medicaid whether the child is 4E or not 4E within the record, as long as it's a child that is in the custody of that sending state. It may not always make sense, though, if this is meant to be a long-term kinship or relative placement. It may make more sense to have that family member go to their county JFS and apply for child-only benefits, because the Medicaid that is established in the ICPC record will be terminated when the ICPC is terminated. So it makes sense if this is a border county and this is a foster placement, let's say, and then that child is eventually, leaving Ohio when the placement is over, then the Ohio Medicaid will end with that. So, but you can establish Medicaid if need be, and there's also a place to terminate it when the ICPC is terminated. Okay, so trying to think what else. Again, you're also, for these incoming records, when you approve the placement, you are not closing out your case. You're not terminating your ICPC record at that time. The ICPC record needs to stay open until it is terminated by the sending state, or if you have denied the placement, you could close it. But if the placement is approved, that approval is good for up to 6 months. So that other state can determine, you know, if they've looked at multiple placements, which one is going to be best for the child, and they can let you know that they are or are not going to use this placement setting for the child. So you leave the case open, you leave your ICPC record active until it is terminated by that other state.
And in part, this is because you'll lose your connection to the NEICE system if you close it. So if you approve it and then close it, and now they want to place, you have no way of reconnecting that to NEICE.
Okay, I imagine we have some questions before we move on. So, okay, there is a question about the 100A. We are updating it to be in line. The SACWIS generated 100A report is being updated to the current JFS version because the SACWIS version was a bit outdated. So we are in the process of getting it updated, and it will pull in the information that you record in your ICPC record. There is also a question about what if an intake is mistakenly created. We do have processes in place where the help desk is not always able to, we're not always able to process a request to get rid of an intake. However, for these ones created from NEICE, we are going to have to institute a process so that if it's a NEICE created in error intake, that we will be able to get those cleared off. So if that happens, you will need to submit a request to the help desk. You'll need to send in a ticket and explain why this intake is not needed so that we can take care of it. We don't want it to sit there forever. Okay, we have a question about whether we should start Ohio Medicaid if the child is placed with an approved relative, not a foster home, and the placement is non-reimbursable. Again, I am going to give my not a Medicaid expert disclaimer, but what I was told is that the child doesn't necessarily have to be 4E. However, it doesn't always make the most sense to set up Medicaid through the ICPC record for a child that has been placed with a relative, because generally the goal is that that relative will have custody and that this will become a permanent placement for the child. And once the ICPC ends, this Medicaid that's set up in the ICPC record will end. So for a kinship placement, my understanding is that it makes more sense to advise that relative to go and apply for child-only benefits at their county JFS. We have a question about whether the caregivers should be on the intake, and actually only the children are participants of the intake, and they are the case members. And so one of your children, if it's a sibling group, is going to be selected as the CRP, and that's really the standard process. And so for consistency, that's how we'll do it. But we will have you creating those caregivers or potential caregivers as through the ICPC record to link those persons or their provider records to the ICPC.
And if you really want to, you can put them as an associated member or associated person on the case, and that way when you search, you can see this person is associated to this case.
And also, if you do, thank you for reminding me, if you add them to the associated persons, you're also able to record the person-level relationships between the child and the relative in that way as well. So it serves a lot of good purposes if you have the habit of doing that. Okay, so there is a question about if I search for a provider and they're not already an existing provider, will the system create it automatically, or do you need to go through the steps to add the provider? You still need to go through the normal steps if that provider does not exist in SACWIS. However, it's no different than what you would be doing anyway, as far as your inquiry process to then create a provider record, for that family. Now, I know historically the kinship assessments were not always created in SACWIS, but that is something that is coming. So it's the way that we're going to be doing things. And so you will be creating provider records for kinship homes as well as foster or adoptive homes. And you do, especially for those, I mean, you do need to go through the normal process so that all those pieces are in place for the provider record. If you do have a person that's the placement resource and you add them as a person and they don't currently have a provider, and then you go and you complete their home study and maybe you approve them as an adoptive home or the kinship home or what have you, we would want you to go back into your ICPC record and update. Once you have a provider, go in and update and link that provider record to the ICPC, because again, this is going to provide some notifications, and it's also going to help on the provider side when those folks need to track the placements coming in and out of their provider home. So we do want you to go in once you have that information, or if you're approving the home, to go back and connect it to your ICPC, and that's how that's going to work at this time. We have had some folks ask about notifications, and so when there is a communication from NEICE, SACWIS will send an email notification to the ADCA for the receiving agency and his or her supervisor as a backup when a communication comes in. So it's very important that the ADCA folks at your agency have the security user group that's going to be called ICPC and ICAMA ADCA Administrator. So when you go into security and add user groups to that person or whoever handles that for your agency, we'll want to give them that ADCA admin security. And then the other really important thing for all the notifications that SACWIS provides is that the employee's email needs to be recorded on their employee record in SACWIS. That's how SACWIS knows how to reach you. So you'll want to do those two things. You can do the email anytime now, and then once the new functionality is live in the next SACWIS build, which is scheduled for release on June 30th, then you'll be able to go in and select that new security user group for your ADCA. We also have some additional notifications related to ICPC, and these are in your slides, so I'm not going to read everything, but we will notify you when a child within ICPC turns 18 or 21. Since if they haven't yet been terminated, then there's a good chance that that record probably does need to be closed and you need to follow up with the other state. We're also going to let you know if the ICPC placement approval expires, and that's both for an outgoing where you've requested a placement and the placement was approved, but you never documented that you actually made that placement, or for one that's coming in. You said, yes, the placement's approved, and then you never heard back. After 6 months, that placement approval expires, so we will send a notification to let people know that that has occurred. As I said, we would like you to go and link the provider record if they don't have a provider at the time we're starting the ICPC, but they are becoming a provider later. We do want to go back and link that provider record to the ICPC, and that will send a notification to the provider workers to let them know that, hey, this county is looking at your home for placement of 3 children. The other thing is, once that child is placed, that provider worker gets notified, because they do need to do some things on their end, and they need to know that there are additional placements in that home. So we're just going to give them a heads up. Okay, and then again, with the security user groups, just to kind of summarize, any worker that has access to the case can view the ICPC record as long as it doesn't contain any finalized, adopted, sealed children. So if you are an ICPC worker that's assigned to the case, you can create or edit records for your own agency, since we know there can be more than one county who might be working an ICPC request for the same child at the same time. We sometimes are sharing cases. but you are able to edit any of the records that are for your own agency, as long as you're assigned to the case. With the ICPC ADCA Administrator Security, you can edit the records that belong to your agency without having to be assigned to the specific cases. And you can set up records as long as somebody from your agency is assigned to the case. We wouldn't want you to set up a brand new ICPC record in a case that might be shared with another county if nobody from your agency is assigned to that case, because it would be easy to get lost in the shuffle if it's not on anybody's workload. So that's how we're solving for that concern. Now, I said that for closed and sealed adopted children, if there's any sealed child on the ICPC record, then you have to have the closed sealed adoption reviewer security to view records for any agency. If you're assigned to the case, or if you are that ADCA who signed off on the placement, then you're going to be able to view those records for your own agency. And then, of course, Heather Spencer is the state ICPC coordinator security person, and she can access any of the ICPC records. So if you're having questions or challenges that she can help you with, she is able to look at those records and give you guidance. Okay, we do have a question about if any current ICPC requests for outgoing placements need to be entered in SACWIS on the ICPC tab, and is this currently a requirement?
This is currently a requirement. You should always be putting an ICPC record on the case to document that you have sent an ICPC request and document the information about it.
And part of that too, we have reporting requirements as a state that we do need to track, and I think the new functionality and some of the new data fields will help do a better job of this, but we have to be able to know how many placements came into Ohio and how many kids were placed out of Ohio through the ICPC. So it's really important that all of these be documented, even if they are non-NEICE states and you're going to be doing some of the sending of the information, you know, the old way through the mail. It's still really important that the information be documented in SACWIS so that we have the data. A future enhancement is planned that will actually pull some of this information forward into the home study or what have you. But for now, it's a display as a first step. So we're at least able to see those placements. I have our contact information up here, both our policy partners who I appreciate joining us today to help out with the webinar, as well as Melissa and I with SACWIS. And then all of this new functionality that we reviewed today will be in the next SACWIS build, which is going to be build 3.17, that is scheduled to go into production on June 30th. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for your participation today. And again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.